Hey everyone, welcome to the Hash Rate podcast. I am the Bitcoin Broski. We got a packed house here today. Excited to be co-hosting this thing with MeanHash. How you doing, MeanHash?
I'm doing good.
It's good to have you on again, man.
It's good to
It's
be
been too
back.
long. It's been too long.
It has been too long.
And we are also joined today by our special guest from Zcoin, Reuben Yap. Reuben, how you doing?
Hi, doing great. Thanks so much for having me. Real pleasure to be here.
Hey, the pleasure is ours. We've been excited for this conversation for a while. I wanted MeanHash to join me because he is definitely the hash rate privacy expert. But before we get into like the meat of our conversation, I know we're going to talk about quite a lot, privacy focused. How did you get started with Zcoin?
So I actually when I joined Zcoin, I was actually still a lawyer. I was a partner at a law firm, and I started in cryptocurrency like maybe early 2013, and I had dabbled a bit in all sorts of things, including mining, and got involved with the Dash community and all those sorts, even the Monero community. And I felt like, I kind of done everything, lost money on exchange hacks, kind of did mining, had my own little farm. And then I was like, I actually want to be part of the team to see how a coin team works. And I offered, because that time when Zcoin started in September 2016, there was only two people in it. The two co-founders basically. And I said like, hey, do you want someone to explain your technical stuff in an easy to digest manner? I'm your guy, you just pay me like $250 a month and I'll do it for shiggles, And that's kind of how I got my feet wet into Zcoin. And straight after that, I was just thrown into a whirlwind, which I guess we can go into later, but that is an interesting story.
Let's get into it. I mean, first and foremost, I think getting any attorney on your team for $250 a month is a steal. So if there's any attorneys out there listening, at that rate, hash rate might be hiring. So Let's talk about this whirlwind at Zcoin. What happened after you started?
So I came on as a community manager. That was my official designation. And there were two guys. I wouldn't probably name the other guy, but one guy is Paramin, who's still our founder. And the other guy, well, you can definitely Google him. But what happened was the other guy just kind of like wasn't involved in the project at all. Like he wasn't really doing much. And I was like, hey, you're the co-founder. Why aren't you more out there? And like several times, because there was like really, he was getting a lot of attention, like, a lot of podcasts wanted to interview him. He even had like a debate with Monero, the Ricardo Spagni, right? And he didn't prepare for it all and just got absolutely slaughtered. So that was just one part of it. But, it already kind of gave me like kind of alarm bells, like, hey, you're the co-founder, but you're not invested in the project based on your time. You just say that you're talking to investors all the time, which is kind of strange. After that, basically there was a disagreement. He basically said that our co-founder was not really a co-founder. He's just a contractor, and that he doesn't have the money to give to Paramin that they raised from their seed run. So basically, we did not have any seed money whatsoever. We got our seed money, but this guy just took it all. And when the project launched, we didn't have this money there. So we had money from like Roger Ver, a little bit from some like startup Chile and some other stuff, and there was another seed investor. It wasn't a lot of money. I mean, this was before ICO and everything, but it was still a decent sum amount of money to hire programmers and stuff like that. But 1 month in, we realized that money wasn't there because we asked him like demonstrate ownership of the coins that you say that you have, and he couldn't, right? So it was all just disappeared like that. And I think, without going into the legal details, we looked into the documentation. It wasn't that great. And we had to find a new guy to basically come in to give us some a little bit of money so that we can continue the project. And we got this guy called Tim Lee who really saved our asses. And what we had to do was fork this co-founder out, who then, of course, put up a fight. And but he lost because all the community was against him. The exchanges and the pools were all against him. So basically, he was forked out. We brought in this new investor in, and that was the beginning of Zcoin. So yeah, really whirlwind. And I was like, crap, I thought I would be doing this job to kind of relax from law. And then I was like getting into like looking at legal documents. I'm like, oh man, like what have I gotten myself into for $250 a month, right?
So it ended up being a good bargain for them. Well,
yeah.
so Reuben, it seems like an ever increasing amount of privacy coins, right? Like you've got a gazillion forks of Monero and Zcash and whatever. Right. There's tons. What is Zcoin's value proposition, and how do you separate yourself from the other privacy coins out there?
Well, first of all, I mean, our privacy protocol is not forked from anyone. We actually develop our own privacy protocol almost from scratch. The current protocol that we're using is called Sigma, or it's implementation of something called one out of many proofs. We are the first ones to do this. And basically, we allow kind of like a zero knowledge proof type of technology without trusted setup. And I guess the basic idea for listeners or like how this protocol works is that we take coins, we burn it up, and then at any time in the future, you can redeem them for brand new ones with no previous transaction history. And this is kind of like different than, let's say, like something like Monero or Mimblewimble, which are kind of like decoy based, where you're introducing noise and kind of hiding in the crowd. Well, here it's the way I like to kind of explain it is kind of like farts in the lift. And the way it's like, okay, like, if I'm Bitcoin,
awesome
I go
analogy.
into the lift and I fart, right? And I'm the only guy there. Yep, that's him. Reuben's the one who farted. That's Bitcoin, right? Monero is a bit like, it's like drag 10 other people into the lift and let out a fart and like, could be one of these 11 people in the lift, right? Then it's a bit more nefarious. They find everyone who wants to fart and then they bring it all into the lift and they all fart at the same time. Well, ours is the word like zero knowledge proof, like sort of this burn and redeem function is kind of like farting, making it disappear, and then maybe 2 years later make it smell. So you have your anonymity set or your plausible deniability is not just with the people in the lift, but anyone who entered the lift ever. So we feel that that's a better privacy model. But yeah,
it's like the ultimate silent but deadly, huh? That's crazy.
Yeah, definitely. My PR team told me not to use this analogy, but I love it too much. So,
well, I mean, let's just be realistic. Now that's the only way that anyone can describe privacy. So
definitely,
fart in the lift is the new go-to.
Hashtag fart in the lift.
Right. So, I mean, in your mind, though, Reuben, is there the need for all of these privacy coins?
I think I wouldn't say that they're all needed, but I do believe that they definitely needs to be different approaches to privacy, right? I mean, we're still kind of early in the game. I mean, not just in blockchain, but especially on privacy technology on the blockchain. And it is a cat and mouse game, right? Like, oh yes, we have like all sorts of encryption schemes now. That doesn't mean we stop looking at encryption schemes, right? So I really feel like coins that do like are pushing technology like us, like Monero, like Zcash, even let's say Green or Beam, to a certain extent as well. They're pushing different approaches to privacy, and they each have their different trade-offs, right? There's no perfect privacy protocol. You cannot optimize for everything. And we feel that, okay, that's fine. I do think there's enough room for privacy protocols until there's like a really, really clear winner, which I don't think there is right now. Now, coins that just kind of like take the technology and maybe change a bit of the tokenomics, I mean, maybe, you know, sometimes like people who want green with a different tokenomic model, that's fine. Or they implement it as a feature for their other stuff, like, you know, for example, projects like Zcash, fine. Or even like a project like Pirate Chain, like R, right? Where they are saying that I want to implement full Z to Z support and no optional privacy. I do think there's value there because, you know, they are taking the technology and applying it in a way that the main projects aren't doing. But if you're just changing a little bit of things, then no, I don't think those privacy coins are worth pursuing. But like, for example, now that there's R, which is kind of saying that you can do Z to Z transactions, exchanges would actually, you know, accept fully shielded transactions. I do think they are helping the whole ecosystem as a whole. So yeah, that's kind of my take on that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think a lot of what we've seen roll out with different projects is kind of just taking and picking different things that are a part of other projects and putting them together.
Yeah,
I really think it
Frankenstein.
yeah, I feel like it does though help drive protection of all the users because they all kind of implement stuff in their own way and they're basically all going to be under attack all the time to prove that they're not really private. And so it really provides a kind of a wider landscape of, okay, well, what worked with this one? What didn't work with this one? Where's the vulnerabilities here? You know, I think eventually it's going to come to a lesser or just a few implementations that end up being really what is the
Correct.
most beneficial. But for now, I think kind of testing as many different things as possible really helps drive the innovation.
I would agree, except that a lot of these folks, they do not actually understand the underlying privacy tech behind it, right? Like ZK Snarks, they just take it and, you know, they just implement it and they don't really get into the nitty gritty. They just trust that this code it's from Zcash or it's from Zcoin or it's from PivX, you know, I'm just going to apply it as it is. And if they aren't actually like digging into the internal guts or coming out of their own implementation, I would say they aren't actually helping with like improving the protocol and improving the security. I guess it means that there's a bigger bounty on top of all of us, but that's the only contribution. But if they are saying that like, okay, you know, if you have guys that can actually look at the code and look at the cryptography and say, oh, maybe that's not the right way to implement it or stuff like that, then yes. But the vast majority of projects that I've seen don't actually have that capability and actually rely on the parent projects to push the technology further or give them advice on how to implement it or just take it like lock, stock, and barrel, right? So, I mean, I guess that's a differentiation there. Not to say that there's no value with these other projects, especially if they're applying technology in a different way. But I wouldn't say they're like contributing to the privacy space as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think a big part of it is just even if they're taking from different projects and maybe not developing the cryptography, I think it's been kind of interesting to see like Swap is kind of a good example. It's pretty much a Monero fork. But instead of using Monero's POW algorithm, they've switched and they're using Kukuru. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's kind of an interesting way to test different models because you're basically taking something that's CPU mineable that in Monero that has been historically mined by botnets. And
Mm-hmm.
instead of doing that, you're moving it over to basically home miners with GPUs or GPU farms. So I think that even though they're not really doing anything for the cryptography part, the part of what they've combined with the algorithm and the Monero cryptography is at least an interesting use case related to decentralization and whether or not having Monero be something that's CPU mineable is the right move for it, or if doing something with GPU mineable gets a better decentralized network. So, you know, from a mining standpoint, there's still some benefit in there. It may not be related to the cryptography, but the security as a whole for the coin, I think, it's still an interesting implementation.
Yeah, I think also there was another coin. Was it Epic? That was like combining both the GPU and the CPU and the ASIC algorithms and like chaining them all together. I mean, I wouldn't like, I wouldn't pretend to be an expert to see how secure those type of implementations are, but they're definitely interesting ways to approach the problem. Um, and you know, I've actually, so Zcoin actually started with the kind of goal to be CPU mineable, right? And we kind of actually achieved that, but except that, you know, the verification time was really bad, and we then moved to MTP, which was actually theoretically supposed to be giving CPUs and GPUs almost like the same, like this, they're on the same level. Which I think, you know, in retrospect, although we spent a lot of money on that, we spent a lot of research time, like a lot of time, because so this MTP Merkle tree proves it was actually created by the guys who did Acquihash, and it was supposed to be an improvement over Acquihash to make it more ASIC resistant. And they called the paper was called egalitarian computing. So it was supposed to be like GPU, CPU, whatever thing, you're gonna get roughly the same like performance ish. And what happened was like 1 month before launch, there was a vulnerability that was discovered in the MTP protocol. We had to scrap the whole thing, go back to the drawing board, throw more money at the researchers, get it redone. And by that time, we're like, God, you know, it's like, at the end of the day, MTP is just very GPU friendly. It's not possible to optimize for both CPU and GPU. And then like prop power came about, right? And then RandomX came, and we're like, wow, we just wasted a whole lot of time and money on this MTP thing because it was based on wrong assumptions. And I guess it was an interesting experiment, but it was a very costly one for Zcoin, and that's one of the regrets that I have when in like leading this project.
Yeah, I actually really like the MTP algorithm. It's got some good things to it from a GPU mining standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
It's super memory intensive, so it knocks out some of the lower end GPUs. They're not really able to run it efficiently. Um, but it's pretty energy efficient, and so from that standpoint,
Mm.
I think it does a really good job from that. It's more similar to Equihash then, whereas like ProgPow tends to suck electricity. Um, so I mean, I think that there's still a place for it. I think it probably just isn't in what I would consider its kind of final phase. I think that there probably could be some improvements made to it, but I still think it's an interesting implementation of it.
Yeah, one of the things that there was like a big issue with MTP was that the header size is like 200 kilobytes, and of course there are ways to like bring that down, but even if we bring it down, it's still like 50 to 100 kilobytes, and that's just a lot of wasted space. And that's something that, you know, we're like, oh, do we actually want to go back to the drawing board, spend more money on this, and then have it audited again, you know, like, or should we be focusing on our privacy tag? That's a really big question that we had to ask ourselves. So that's kind of why we're like, you know, MTP. Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you, what do you feel about coins like Veil is a good example where it's mineable plus has a proof of stake implementation. Have you studied coins that are hybrid like that much?
Not really. I mean, like I've taken a look at the Decred model. I think it's quite interesting, but I don't really have a particular viewpoint on that. I always have a bit of a concern where, like, I'm actually not against proof of stake. I mean, this is my own personal opinion. Obviously, I cannot speak for the whole of Zcoin or the community, but personally, the way I see it, that proof of work is the best that we got in distribution mechanisms. You know, and like, you need to talk about ICO, airdrops, and stuff like that. That's all that centralized element, right? Because now there's this whole new DeFi thing with like a bootstrapping liquidity, and not sure I understand that fully, but as far as I understand, proof of work is the best way to distribute stuff, provided that it can be done with commodity hardware. That's my personal view. But if there's a way to, let's say, like, you know, if after 10 years or so, or even like 12 years or something like that, where, you know, especially when, you know, we'll see what happens when Bitcoin like rewards almost go to zero, right? And does it make sense to move to a proof of stake model there? Then maybe it makes sense. I'm not so sure how I feel about the hybrid models there. I mean, it just seems that I guess it's like a bit risky because then you kind of have to make sure that it plays nice with each other. But obviously, many coins have done it. But I don't have like a very strong opinion either way. But I just think that it's important to have a very strong distributive element of proof of work, at least in the first few years of the project.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement with that. It's the early distribution of the hash makes a big deal in its community building too, right? If it's ASIC right out of the gate, then it's too exclusive for most people to get involved, and it leads to centralization of, you know, by big players. How do you feel that this is being impacted now by the quote unquote secret ASIC community that's kind of springing up? And I shouldn't say springing up, it's been in place for a while, right? But the secret Asian community, especially in Asia, how do you feel that that's impacting privacy coins at present?
Well, that's why I'm personally, I'm pretty against ASICs. Like, I mean, I remember like one of my friends from who used to be from Bitmain was saying that an ASIC is a form of proof of stake, which, yeah, I mean, I can kind of see where that is, because like you own something that can only mine like one coin, and in a way it's like I have skin in the game, right? And that's kind of how the whole thing about ASIC and proof of stake is about. But the difference is that ASICs are like, there's no way to have a fair playing field for ASICs just because of the amount of R&D that needs to go into it. And the distribution of the ASICs is going to be a problem. Like, you know, how are you going to beat like ASICs from China if you already lose so much money shipping it over, paying customs? How can you, you know, and then you have to consider the power factor cost as well. Proof of stake is, I guess, more egalitarian in that regard. Like, if you just look at it from the security point of view. And I really feel that if ASICs aren't going to help with distribution, then you kind of defeat one of the biggest good things about proof of work, right? And I know that many coins have this kind of like hard fork mentality. Oh, if we detect ASICs on the network, if we detect FPGAs on the network, we can fork them out. Now, first of all, I don't think that's a sustainable strategy, because first of all, I think the ASICs we're gonna get better at hiding their tracks, right? Because I think the way that they have been detected now is because the ASICs don't bother to hide their nonsense as things like that. As far as I understand.
Yeah, you're right.
If they bothered to do that, maybe it would be much harder to detect. And all you can tell is this huge surge in hash rate and everyone going unprofitable, and then you're making a guess. Oh, there must be FPGAs on ASICs on the network, which is really arbitrary. And you're trading off like ASICs versus like centralization of development, like a developer that can say, oh, I'm going to hard fork, I'm going to change the algorithm. Like, for example, Beam, of course, now they've set it into their permanent algorithm. But for the first few 6 months, it was this one guy who was like determining what the algorithm was, kept it secret, and released it and stuff. That is a real like form of centralization. I think that was the same with Monero as well before RandomX came about. So I don't think, I really think that even if you say secret ASICs, you're just pushing ASICs to be secret, exactly, right?
Yeah.
And if you say that I'm an anti-ASIC coin, that's when secret ASICs are going to come about, and you're not going to detect it, as far as I know. As long as you're worth something, you know, this is something that maybe is kind of inevitable. And I would say like anti-ASIC algorithms like ourselves are only kind of trying to, it's like a stopgap. We're trying to prolong the period of commodity mining as much as we can, making it as inefficient and unaffordable for you to develop it, so that once we are so big, you know, it's already well distributed, then you can have whatever ASICs you want. Yeah.
So with the ASICs, okay, so that aside, I think one of the biggest questions that I'm interested in, and this has to do again with just the sheer number of privacy coins, real use case, right?
Hmm.
How do you see Zcoin's adoption coming?
I think this is a really good question, and I think anyone who says they've solved it is probably lying or in a little bit of a dreamland. But the way I see it, it's like, okay, you can talk about merchant adoption, we can talk about like, use cases of privacy and stuff like that. But I'm actually going back to something more fundamental, right? Is there a use case for cryptocurrencies? At least in the original way that we saw cryptocurrencies, right? Because like in 2008, with the whole subprime mortgage crisis, we're talking about money that cannot be controlled by any one entity, that cannot be censored, that cannot be seizable. And if those properties are important, which is yet to be known, right? I mean, we don't know whether there's such, I would like to think that there's such a place for it. But if we believe in the original sort of principles of cryptocurrencies, then yes, definitely there's a real use case for private cryptocurrencies, because it doesn't seem that Bitcoin is going to get any meaningful privacy anytime soon. I mean, they're all like jizzing themselves over Schnorr and Taproot. I'm like, dude, that doesn't really provide any sort of privacy whatsoever.
Sure.
There's like, yeah, it's like I'm all naked and I put a little lift to cover one nipple. Like, oh yeah, that's an improvement in privacy. Like, yeah, technically you're right, but no, you're still butt naked. Yeah.
You have the best analogies, man. But I mean, to your point, though, I mean, Bitcoin can be seized, right? We've seen that.
Yes.
There's all kinds of legal precedents now that are basically walking back all of the privacy aspects of Bitcoin. I mean, it's clear that it's been used. The blockchain's been used to trace back criminal activity, and it's led to arrests. Even in situations when there's been mixing, right? So even the attempts at private transaction have not really shielded the users or protected them in any way. I mean, I agree. I tend to think that there is a big hopeful adoption case for cryptocurrencies, because it's clear that like paper money is going away, right? I mean, you've got China with DCEP. I think Thailand is implementing their digital currency. Brazil just shut down service to WhatsApp because they're launching their digital currency. So
there's a very scary trend of like moving away from physical cash to digital currencies and what we call CBDCs, right? Central bank digital currencies. And of course, you got stuff like Libra and stuff like that. And I don't think, especially in the Asian community, people don't realize what they're going to be giving up, right? Like in China, it's already like, everything's like WeChat Pay and all sorts of payment platforms. But you are seeing around the world the rise of more authoritarian nationalist governments. Maybe they still call themselves democracy, but it's the way it's kind of acted is very oppressive, right? And how would the oppressive government stay in power? It's actually pretty simple. If you say, one of the things, the analogies, like, Americans are like, we need to have the right to bear arms so that we can rise against the government. We need all these automatic weapons and stuff like that. Okay, fine, whatever your view on that. Let's say we say that's true. What's the point of having weapons if it can just cut you off from all your money? What, you're going to buy bullets? Where you're going to find money? I'm just going to cut you off from the financial system just like that. And you can't do that with a true cryptocurrency, but with all these other CBDCs and all this sort of stuff, you definitely can. It's so much easier to do that. You don't even need to go to your home. They just like, press a button, you're locked out from the financial system. And this can even happen by mistake. I mean, we even see like the whole, like in the US, like the whole civil instant forfeiture thing where police like seize stuff just on like suspicion or, like cash. That's also a threat, and they, it's actually a profitable thing for them, regardless of whether of any proof of fault, right? And I really feel that, people say that Bitcoin is unseizable. Let me point the gun to your head. Like, let's say you go to a coffee shop, you're going to transfer me one coin or whatever, 0.001 coin, and say, oh, that came from a wallet with 100 Bitcoin or 100,000 Bitcoin. I'm just going to point a gun to your head and say, yep, give me the private keys. I'm not just going to blow your head off, or like, maybe probably torture you one by one until I get the keys, right? I mean, that's what unseizable is. If my balances are hidden, if the source is hidden and stuff, that becomes a lot more harder, because when I'm giving out anything, it's just like 0.01, I'm not making myself a target, right?
Right.
And I think that's really important. And people say, well, it's never been kind of seized before, only in drug cases. I think that's very optimistic and kind of silly, because you see Iran is stocking their own Bitcoin reserves. North Korea is stocking their Bitcoin reserves. Venezuela also talking about it. It'll only be a matter of time before like someone at US says like, nope, you're going to blacklist all coins with that tame trail. Then
already
where's
doing
your
it.
unseized? Yeah. So
I mean,
what are you going?
Yeah, there's already
Correct.
know your transaction. Like we've, on this podcast, we've interviewed a couple of financial institutions. Matrixport was on, and they're talking about how they're leading the charge with KYT. And I mean, all that is basically is it's tracking the transaction history of Bitcoin. And if these coins have been anywhere nefarious, which is vague and nebulous and defined by a third party that isn't you, right?
Yeah.
Then those coins can't be used. They can't be held by an institution. They're dirty. And what I was talking to Cynthia from Matrixport about is like, okay, so let's say one of these transactions happens and a coin flows through an Iranian wallet on its way to, Fidelity or some massive organization in the United States. If that coin is flagged KYT, is it taken out of circulation? Like, is it no longer a valid Bitcoin? Does that diminish the overall supply? Like
the whole fungibility thing, right?
Right.
And like right now, even if Satoshi came up and said, I want to spend my coins, unless you're right and autistic, but that's a separate question. But let's say Satoshi comes and like he wants to actually use his Bitcoin. How can he do that? He can't, I don't think any exchange would say like, oh my God, this is Satoshi's coin. I'm not going to ask who is it from or require KYC or something like that, I think that's like, I don't know why people don't see the problem. And, of course, I especially the people that, especially when I do a lot of AMAs and people saying like, oh, how do you prevent nefarious activity? How do you stop the money laundering and stuff like that? I'm like, dude, it happens on our traditional financial systems super easily and powered by banks, right? And you take a look at their own like the own reports about like the US actually, I can't remember what was it, but it was a study on terrorist funding, and they actually like did studies on how to combat basically terrorist funding and money laundering. And of course, cryptocurrencies was a very, very tiny part of it. And of course, they recognized the risk. But they never said ban cryptocurrencies. That was not their suggestion. They were saying that the way to regulate it is through better financial systems and like more cooperative regulations. Because they realized that if you ban it, you're just going to push it underground, right?
Right.
And you kind of like want to, like if you want Bitcoin to be legitimized and whatnot, you want it actually to be flowing on the legitimate channels or whatnot. But then if you start banning it, there will be ways for it to transact elsewhere. So I don't know. I always think that money should have no morals. Like there's no morality to money. Like gold is gold. Like gold can be bad gold, And I think that's how we view money. Like it should be a public utility, right? And in a way, like you take a look. I mean, I know you guys are Americans, but are you guys Americans?
No. Yeah, but I live in Europe. But yeah.
Yeah. So, the way they're saying that we are the only ones that can print money at will, and then we're not going to have like some sort of banana money, right? And that sort of arrogance, that is dangerous, right? That means they realize that they have that power to just do what they want, make like worthless money, but make it still worth something. And that's, to me, is... It's scary. It's like it's not just a superpower. This is like full control, That's how I see it anyway.
But to that end, Reuben, do you think they're ever going to relinquish that power? Right? Like, are we going to come to a point where they're like, no, I'm good. No, it's like, like I want to give up my ability to print endless money and provide quantitative easing and prop up the economy. I mean, at what point is there a point when that goes away? I think that's the hardest thing to forecast.
The way I see it is that, look, we're not going to replace fiat. I mean, that is a given. Like, to me, I don't know in what universe that fiat stops existing, right? Unless countries stop existing, and then the least of our problems is the price of Bitcoin, right?
Right.
But I see it as posing as a realistic alternative, to the point that if the governments are like, say, if I'm going to just go print willy-nilly, I have this alternative of cryptocurrencies at my back door, right? And if I go too hardcore, I'm just going to empower that cryptocurrency community, right? Now, personally, this might sound like really ridiculous. I'm actually okay if cryptocurrencies forever remain to be a niche. Like it'll be an important niche, but like doesn't have to have everyone on it. But the fact that we exist, the fact that we are traded, that we have volume, that there are places to transact with this, will make at least governments think, should we be total assholes because there's this other alternative right there waiting for us to mess up? And that's kind of how I see where we are. Not to say that this niche is a small thing. Like, it is a potentially really, really big market, but it doesn't mean that it's not the binary system where it has to be cryptocurrencies and no fiat. I do see a world where both are coexisting and both having interactions with each other. And that's kind of, I guess, the best way to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think part of the thing that's going to drive some of the change with adoption of cryptocurrency is with all the quantitative easing that's going on in the US and really across the whole world right now, is the purchasing power of fiat is dropping. And so,
Yep.
like, it's propping up the stock markets, it's quote propping up the economies.
Yep.
But what it's really doing is making your fiat currency be able to buy less physical goods. And at some
Right.
point in time, people are going to realize, holy crap, a Big Mac has gone from a Big Mac meal has gone from costing $2 or $2.50 when I was really young to costing $9 now.
Yep.
And that's inflation. It's hidden inflation because it's counted in what they call flexible cost of goods. So it's not calculated as part of the actual inflation rate. But you start to see where you're like, oh, this money that I put in my bank can't buy me what it used to be able to buy me when I put it in my bank. So I think as you see that more and more, people are going to look for other ways to hedge against that reduction of purchasing power. And I still think in like the really big, strong economic countries, it's going to be fiat's going to exist and probably exist indefinitely. But I think we're starting to see in some of the smaller countries where, you're seeing where half of the population or close to it is like, well, maybe we should use cryptocurrency because we don't trust our central currency. I mean, the big one in the news right now is Lebanon.
Okay.
If you follow their currency right now, it is a disaster. It's literally losing like 15% of its purchasing power every day right now, which is insane. I mean, there's news reporters and stuff from Lebanon that are like, I saved money my whole life. I'm, 35, 40 years old. All the money that I've earned my whole life and saved up now isn't even worth like $200 US because they had it all saved in Lebanese pounds. So, I think as we start to see a little bit more of problems in those smaller countries that can't just print money like the US and have it still hold its value relatively, people are going to start looking for alternatives, and whether that be hold US dollars instead or some other type of, less flexible in purchasing power you know, and cryptocurrencies will hold that, you know. I think that that's important.
One of the interesting things was like I actually found out like there was a group of people who were mining Zcoin in Venezuela, and of course, you know, everyone has heard the Venezuela story. It's kind of like, you know, it's like it's happening but not really happening. You know, it's. But one of the things that what kind of really shocked me, because I was like, look, you know, you're mining Zcoin, you're only getting like so little a month, you know, and then he's like, little to you, but a lot to me. And I was like, oh gosh, yeah, you know, like what may seem not a lot of money to us is enough to feed the family then. And sure, you know, they're not going to move markets and stuff like that, but it's actually something that's meaningful to them. Not just saying Zcoin, but any cryptocurrency that they could mine, you know, from somewhere. And that to me was like, wow, that's the power of proof of work right there. You know, like you don't have to go to an exchange or get it from somewhere. You can just get it just by dedicating your energy and your computer hardware to do that. And I thought that was a particularly powerful thing that came to me, and that's why I've been such a big fan of proof of work, especially with commodity hardware. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very important point that you guys are raising. With the current climate as it is now, and how it seems like people are reticent to give up their freedoms, right? And you had mentioned, Reuben, how, okay, sure, claiming that cryptocurrency could be used for nefarious activities is one way to kind of swat things down. But look at all of the positive, air quotes, technology that's coming into place now that's most certainly going to be used in a way to negatively impact our privacy, like contact tracing for COVID-19. Or facial recognition because they want to make sure that terrorist activity isn't occurring, or whatever the case may be. I mean, are you in Hong Kong?
No, I'm in Malaysia. Yeah.
Malaysia. Okay. So, you know, obviously we've seen all of it play out, right? Like if anyone has ever done a case study of surveillance in China, or, you know, WeChat and Alipay, and how much control there is that a government can have over a populace, it's just crazy to me that everywhere else in the world, we're just putting it in place. Like we already know how much control we're giving up, and we're doing it every day. That's the scariest thing for me about giving up fiat, because as it is right now, fiat's really the only widely accepted, untraceable medium of exchange that we have.
Well, cash, physical cash.
Physical cash. Yes, correct. Yeah. So.
And then it's happening everywhere. Like, you know, now you can't have cash transactions over a certain value. And the thing is that it's all being driven by that narrative of like, we're fighting terrorists, we're fighting, you know, crime and stuff like that. But if you take a look at the actual reports, I think in the US, they have done various reports to say, how effective has mass surveillance been? And they're like, no, it hasn't actually been that effective. So, you know, people say, oh, you're against crime. I'm like, look, okay, it's like, if I could, it has to be proportionate, right? And of course, like, yeah, you know, law enforcement and stuff like that. But you can't make it so easy that anyone can just look into everything that you do. Like the way to say it is like, okay, yeah, you know, there's a chance of me falling down in the toilet and knocking my head and dying, right? So in that case, let's have one person to watch you every time you take a bath. So that's not going to happen. I mean, of course, no one would agree to that, but that's
I'm sure some people might agree to it, but not for
maybe not for that reason. So some kinky reason, but it's not like, you know, it's the proportion. And what we are allowing, like you're saying, allowing full surveillance to protect against crime and terrorism. That's the exact analogy, right? Like you have that really, really low case, and they actually can do in other ways, right? Like, you know, they can do the crime in like trade-based money laundering. It's so easy to do, you know, and there's so much like kind of like dodgy banks. It's just so easy. If you are big enough, the crime that matters, they can do it through the regular system anyway. And, you know, banning and doing all this mass surveillance is not going to help you. That's my personal view. And it's actually backed by a lot of reports and generated by like government think tanks. So it's just been the narrative. It's just an excuse to build this surveillance infrastructure, right? And I don't know, I mean, for those who are like religious, you know, they talk about that mark of the beast and stuff like that, you know, like it's like you have that mark, I think if you have that mark, you have to have that mark to do like do transactions. I was like, oh yeah, you know, that's kind of scary. Like, aren't we kind of like going down that path, you know? I mean, even if you're not religious, it's an interesting thing that something so old kind of like brought up a concern like that, right? So that's interesting.
Well, I mean, going down that route, it's actually it's so extreme that yes, to have the mark of the beast, that's what you need to live life, right? To transact, to have, you know, licenses, all those things. But anyone who doesn't have the mark is jailed or killed, right? So it's not just that you're interred. So yeah, God, that would be something crazy. You know, Reuben, as we wrap things up though, I don't want to leave it on a religious note for all of our crypto folks out there.
I'm not particularly religious, but I just thought it was like a really interesting thing.
I mean, the correlations are clearly there, but that all aside, right? One thing that I always like to know from anyone that's on the show, in the next 6 to 12 months, what is something that you are excited about? I know there's a lot of crazy shit going on in the world, but what's something that you're just amped for?
It was Zcoin or in general?
In general.
I don't know. I'm just looking forward to playing Last of Us 2 get the guts. That's like the next one day or so. But I mean, so I mean, during the whole COVID thing, you know, I had to be, because my wife's a doctor, so she's actually on the front line treating COVID patients. So she's an anesthesiologist, and we've been having to like live kind of apart at like long intervals. Like when the first breakout happened, I think we didn't see each other for 2.5 months, even though we're in the same city. Now we're kind of like, you know, seeing each other like 3 weeks at a time. Then she goes off for 3 weeks while she does a COVID cycle and then comes back. I really miss going out, hanging out with friends and just, you know, just chilling, you know. Now it's all like I don't know, I feel like I'm in a kind of like a luxurious jail, you know, and I have a nice apartment and stuff like that, but it's different, you know, you kind of lose that human connection, and Zoom is great and all, but it's really different, you know. I really respect that time, and even like time together with my wife, and that's something hopefully I can look forward to some sort of normalcy returning in the next 6 months. But in terms of like Zcoin, I mean, I'm gonna shield a little bit.
Go for it, man.
We have our next gen privacy protocol, Lelantus, coming, and we're going to go through our first halving, and that's happening in the same time. And Lelantus, I personally feel will be, you know, like the best privacy technology, or like the most balanced among all trade-offs that's going to be out, and that was, you know, homegrown and created by us. So we're seeking audits right now, and that to me is like really exciting. I feel like it's the most important thing that Zcoin has ever done since its inception, and that's coming live maybe sometime in September. So that's personally really exciting to me, and I really look forward to getting that out of the door. I mean, I did tell people like, hey, you know, like whatever happens, if Lelantus goes through, everything goes through and whatnot, whatever happens, I am proud that I've done this for Zcoin, you know, and I can leave or not leave it in a happy state, you know. That's how significant it is. Yeah.
Well, Reuben, I think that's a great note to end on. A significant shill. I'm happy you were able to get that in. If you're listening to the podcast, definitely make sure that you check out Zcoin, that you give Reuben a follow. We'll put all of his contact information, all of Zcoin's information in the show's notes. But Reuben, man, thanks for coming on to talk privacy with MeanHash and I today.
Thanks so much. It was a, you know, absolute pleasure, and glad we got it happening tonight.
Yeah, it's great to finally get you on.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again sometime soon. Well, for the listeners and the viewers of the HASH8 podcast, thank you guys for continuing to tune into the show. As you can tell, we are on YouTube now. Hello. Make sure that you smash the like button and subscribe to the channel so you can get notified every time we release new content. Also, make sure that you leave us a rating and review on your preferred podcast listening platform. But for us here at HASH8, Until next time, we'll talk to you guys all again very soon. Thanks for tuning into the Hash Rate Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please consider liking and sharing this episode with a friend. Also, remember to subscribe to our channel for more amazing content. And if you haven't already, I'd suggest you subscribe to HashRate's weekly email difficulty adjustment. It's a newsletter focused on the most important stories in Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and mining, delivered right to your inbox each and every Wednesday morning. You don't want to miss that. Be sure to head down to the show's notes and subscribe to Difficulty Adjustment newsletter today. And remember, each week, HashRate does a special giveaway for one subscriber to the newsletter. So by subscribing to Difficulty Adjustment newsletter, you are registered for each week's giveaway. And for those of you who don't yet follow us on Twitter, I'd encourage you to do that. We are at HashRate. That's at H4SHR8. Thanks again, and we'll see you next episode.